Hey guys, welcome back. So with this one, we're getting into what if Thor became the Herald of Galactus. And no, this one isn't by Donny Cates, but rather this is the original telling of that story within What If, which came out back in 2005. And by the way, if you haven't checked out Donny Cates' version in The Devourer King, get your life right. But for this version, which was originally written by Robert Kirkman, yup, Walking Dead and Invincible Robert Kirkman. But for this one, it's also really sick, and I just wanted to go back and talk about it, and really just hear your thoughts and comparisons in the comments. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for this one, it takes place a little bit different than a lot of the other What If one-shots, because rather than having the watcher take us through this particular story, or exploration if you will, but for this series back in 2005, we had then explored a series of What If one-shots, to where in this case they were explored through a character named Hector Espejo, I believe was his last name, but instead of having your conventional narration by Uatu, this new character Hector, he was like the world's greatest hacker, to whom with the underground online community he was known as quote-unquote the Watcher. But with doing this back in 2005, this was Marvel's case of trying something different, and in this case where you still had a number of What If one-shots, these series of events that Hector would observe and share, he had gained access to by tapping into the other net, which he would describe as the internet of another dimension, but with doing this he observed a number of events that had taken place differently than they did in the main Marvel universe. And that was like the setup more or less of your 2005 version of What If, with it giving us these different series of events that take place within Earth 717. But with jumping into this one, it starts off with Galactus, who at this point has already arrived on Asgard in order to consume it, which really shouldn't be a thing, but even still there's been a time or two where we've seen this, or at least we had mentions of it, like in Last Planet Standing, but in this case, this is What If, so we're just gonna roll with it, much like a number of other things in the What If series. But with him coming here in Asgard's defense, you then of course got Lady Sif, the Warriors 3, Valkyrie, Hogun, Baldur, this world's version of Heimdall, and nearly every Asgardian you can imagine coming out and trying to stop this from happening. And in this case where you had Thor, who went directly for the elemental converter, which is the machine that Galactus uses to convert planets into energy suitable for consumption. But with Thor going directly for it, Loki told him that he shouldn't just recklessly destroy it, because with Thor mindlessly just destroying this machine, it could cause a chain reaction of events that could do even more damage, which of course then raised Thor's suspicion like, okay Loki, well how do you know so much about this thing? But with the two of them going back and forth, for the most part, you had like all of Asgard going against the Herald of Galactus, to whom within this one shot we really don't get a lot of information about, and really like we didn't even get like her name. But even still, like for a long time, that was something that was pretty common with a lot of what if issues, and even more so when the one-shots were just one-shots rather than like this 2005 collection, because that's just one of those things that comes along with the delivery of these shorter stories. Because if you take the idea of what if the Avengers had never been, it's designed to be an issue you can just hop in and out of, even if you only have a general idea of who the Avengers are. And even now to an extent, it's still kind of a thing. Because if you take the Disney Plus What If series for example, to where in your first episode you had your what if Peggy Carter had taken the super soldier serum, and if you think about it, watching that first episode by itself without having ever seen any other MCU movie or even show for that matter, then it would leave a lot of questions to be asked about what exactly happened within that episode. So for that reason, anytime you read a what if issue or see a what if episode, which still feels amazing to say, like there's a what if TV show, oh my god, like childhood me would not believe anything from 2021. But what I'm saying is like anytime you see something from a what if, think of it almost as like a parody, because it's crafted pretty much the same way, with it standing on the shoulders of the assumption of you having a general familiarity of the base version of either the characters or that particular story. But with all that said, that's one of the reasons why this Herald of Galactus, she just doesn't have a name. But even with that said, I wouldn't be surprised if a writer like Donny Cates just reached back, pulled her out of this story, and just turned around and gave her a completely fleshed out identity, because that happens too. But in this case, she just doesn't have a name and it's not really important to this story. But what we do know as far as any Herald of Galactus is that they wield the power cosmic, and that power ain't no joke. So when this Herald of Galactus, who had led him here to Asgard, she had not only put up a fight with all the Asgardians, but in the process she had also killed Lady Sif, because classic power cosmic is just OP like that. And that's another one of those things that I think about with like these older stories, because even though this issue had came out like in 2005, it very much draws from like your journey into mystery Thor. to where back at that time in the 60s, the power cosmic was just nuts. So there's also that. But with this pulling more so from your Thor from Journey into Mystery, you also had your case to where Thor and Lady Sif, they had grown up together, they had later become lovers. So at this point when the Herald of Galactus kills Sif and Thor sees her fall in battle, because of the time of which this stems from, it's a much deeper loss than him just losing a long time close friend. And because of that, when Thor sees Sif get killed, that warrior madness power buff just pretty much kicks in. And as a result, he just beats the brakes off of this Herald, single-handedly driven by rage and vengeance. But with doing this, he doesn't kill the Herald, and he spares her life, telling her that death is too good for her. But at this point, Thor has beaten this Herald so bad that now she's no longer of use to Galactus. But also with Galactus seeing this, he's pretty impressed on what Thor has done. But with Thor taking out this Herald, he then rallies those that remain of Asgard to make this final stand and defend their home. But before they can take the fight to Galactus, he tells everyone to stop, because at this point he's harvested enough energy from Asgard to sustain him and hold him off to his next meal. And it's here where Galactus then offers Thor the position as his new Herald, with Galactus admiring Thor's power and determination. But of course for Thor that's a big fat no, and he tells Galactus like, prepare yourself for the full wrath of Asgard. But with him saying this, Galactus then points out that Asgard is already spent, like these guys have got nothing left. And really, if Galactus wanted to, he could just wait around or just come back like a month or two later and just finish them off. But with seeing this, Thor then drops Mjolnir and he reluctantly accepts to serve as the Herald of Galactus, with the agreement that Galactus does not consume Asgard. But then from here we skip forward to some time later to where we see Thor, who has been choosing different worlds for Galactus to consume, but with doing this he's only chosen like the most harshest or primitive worlds that he would consider that would be worthy of destruction. But with him doing this and him intentionally avoiding any world that had like intelligent life on it, with him only seeking out worlds that were filled with like terrible beasts and monsters, this had then made his job like way harder than it would have been had he only just pointed out Galactus to the next suitable world. And not even just that, but with him choosing these worlds with these vicious beasts and creatures, he was also just wearing himself out. And with Thor intentionally doing this, Galactus noticed, but he didn't mind so much because he was still eating. But with Thor exercising this method, there were longer gaps between the time that Galactus would feed. And because of this, he would advise Thor to instead search for worlds that were either peaceful or just find worlds that just weren't equipped to resist, so that his process of selection wouldn't be such a chore. But with him saying this, Thor didn't respond, and Galactus knew that Thor really wasn't going to change his ways. So after Galactus fed on this most recent world, he let Thor know that he still got to feed again, because even after consuming this most recent world, Galactus still hungers. But then it's here when Munin, one of the ravens of Asgard, or more specifically one of Odin's ravens, it makes its way all the way out here to find Thor and give him the message that Odin is dead, Asgard is ruined, and as it starts to go on about Loki, Munin then dies before finishing the message. And with hearing this, Thor tells Galactus like, I gotta go back to Asgard, like I gotta take a leave of absence. So it's not like he's trying to quit the job of being a herald, he's just asking for an extended leave with pay. And technically this falls into the agreement of making sure that Asgard is okay, but then of course with Thor asking for PTO, it is rejected harshly. And Galactus more or less lets him know like, Asgard, that's not my problem, because Galactus had only agreed that no harm will come to Asgard as far as him not consuming it. But with him just allowing Thor to leave with the power that Galactus has bestowed upon him, it's essentially like Galactus is now making Asgard his responsibility, because with him allowing Thor to go and check on Asgard whenever he wants to, it's only further delaying the already substantial gap that Galactus has to deal with between meals. But this is also like what I mentioned earlier as far as my belief in Donny Cates taking a lot of inspiration from this particular story, because within the Devourer King event, there was a lot of beats from this story that we saw transferred over to the Thor of the main continuity, which in a lot of ways also make it feel like it's paying homage to the original telling of Thor being bestowed with the power cosmic. And it's pretty fun to go back and just see the similarities. But in this case, one of the main differences with Thor making his disagreement, if you will, with Galactus is that in this case, this version of Thor, he still wanted to honor his obligation. So in this instance, with him telling Galactus that he refuses to find him other worlds unless he allows him to go and check on Asgard, it's quite different from your newer telling to where Thor was like, look, I'm a king now, I gotta change the plans, and because of that I will come and go as I please. But originally for your 717 Thor, he was more so bound to the obligation. And when this happened, Galactus allowed him to go, but he also let Thor know that when he hungered again, Asgard was no longer off limits. And so with Thor being allowed to leave, and in this case having to fly all the way back, which is also one of those funny things with Asgardian storytelling, because really it's more of a realm than rather just like a planet you can fly to. But every once in a while you kind of get the telling of ways that you can travel to Asgard without the Bifrost or the Rainbow Bridge, because comics. But with doing so, it would take an insane amount of time, and that's essentially what we got here. But in this case, with Thor flying back and taking who knows how long to get there, he finds Asgard barren and completely laid to waste this time, with no one in sight and snow falling, to where with the snow he hardly even notices, because at this point he's just overwhelmed with the regret of allowing this to happen. And when he gets there, he just falls to his knees apologizing to his father for failing in allowing their home to come to ruins. But then it's here where Thor also finds out that this whole thing had pretty much been set up by Loki, and though we're not given like the specifics of it, but it's here where we find out through Loki that he had led the World Devourer here in a plan for Galactus to weaken Asgard in order to allow Loki to take the throne. But with leading Galactus here, he didn't know how bad the damage would be. But of course, with Thor hearing this, he's outraged and he tries to attack Loki, but of course that doesn't work out too well with Thor being exhausted from flying all the way here, and you have that on top of Loki's frost giant security intel. But with one of these giants knocking Thor into the chamber where Odin's body is being kept, it's here where Thor then sees Odin's body holding Mjolnir, which for me immediately begs the question, like, who lifted Mjolnir and sat him there? But for Thor, it created this moment to where for him seeing Odin's body, like, it made it real. And it was for this reason that he then picked up Mjolnir and he made the decision to save the people of Asgard rather than the location itself. But also in this moment with Thor taking Mjolnir and immediately knocking back Loki's frost giants, you also had a few things going on at the same time here. Because not only was it like a moment of him still realizing that he was worthy, and on top of that you had the case of his strength being restored, but you then had the case of him going back to his traditional look, but then also making this redefining transition to where from here forward, he's fully accepted his role as the Herald of Galactus. Because now at this point, like when Galactus shows up, Thor is just like, you can have Asgard. Because with what it's become at this point as a result of Loki, Thor considers it an abomination of what it once was. And when Galactus shows up, Thor just hands it over, because at this point now, as far as the location, it's Loki's kingdom, and now it's his problem. And almost like in a way of payback, Thor just lets Galactus begin to consume what's left of Asgard. But then as far as the Asgardian people, who Loki had pretty much just kept in chains within the lower dungeons, Thor had then went to go free them all, and he went to Baldur to get all of those who remained from Asgard to head to the Rainbow Bridge and go to Midgard to make it their new home. But then when Thor emerged from the dungeons and approached Galactus, like for a minute Loki had thought that Thor was like fighting on his side again, or that he had approached Galactus to defend Asgard. But then when Thor bowed to Galactus, and he told him like, there's nothing left here for me, take Asgard, it's yours. To where then right after that he started helping Galactus, who had ordered Thor to take out these frost giants in order to prepare Asgard for consumption. It was here when Loki then realized like, well okay, maybe he's not trying to help. And with Thor doing this at the time, it's also pretty big, because even though he's restored to looking like classic Thor, but from here forward he is classic Thor with the power cosmic. But then soon after Loki's confirmation, it then came swiftly, because with Loki trying to flip the script and ask Thor like, what have you done? What are you doing? It's here where Thor told Loki like, no, this is all you're doing. And it's then when Thor strikes Loki down with just one blow, turning him into a toasty pile of bones. But then also with Baldur leaving on the Rainbow Bridge and taking with him every Asgardian that he could find, and making their way to Midgard, it's here where Baldur had then asked Thor if he was going to leave with them and join them as they made their way to their new home. But in response, Thor told him no, and he let Baldur know that his new place is here with Galactus as his new herald. Because also from here forward, with Thor deciding what world is determined to be devoured and what world isn't, this would also become the means of what would determine whether he was worthy to lift Mjolnir. But from here forward, with him being both fully restored classic Thor and the Herald of Galactus, they were now two in the same. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. But I'll also say, like, I wanted to do this video like a long time ago, like close around the time we were talking about the Donny Cates Devourer King event. But then I was thinking like, okay, we'll do it closer to like the What If series, like when the episodes start rolling out. So it kind of fell back into place on time, but even still, I did want to do it sooner. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments, whether the comments here or over on Discord, because I'm eager to comb through like your guys' comparisons between your 2005 What If and the Devourer King version that we got in early 2020. But with that said, that'll do it for this one. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.